You know him well, obviously, having been on the inside. So take us where you imagine he is right now. This trade with Anthony Davis has been out there all over the place. The young players are clearly kind of crumbling, right? Is that fair to say? They lose by 42 points last night. The deadline is tomorrow. It doesn't look like they'll get Anthony Davis. Where do you think LeBron goes from there?
Well, I think once you build up a certain stamina in your career as a player, you have to remember that you have to go through these things. Through tough times, you have to kind of stay even keeled, especially in the season before All-Star break. This is usually the toughest time to kind of regroup and keep momentum going or build momentum and win games you're supposed to win. You got the trade deadline. They bumped it up a week earlier or 2 weeks earlier now. And there's a lot of pressure. But he knows what he got into. He knew when he went to LA, he knew what it was going to be. He knew the makeup of the team and the potential things that could happen. So he just has to kind of stay with it.
What do you anticipate happening with the Lakers if they don't acquire AD by the trade deadline?
Well, it's kind of an interesting situation. You know how that goes, Jalen. Sometimes, you're in trade rumors and then you're out of them and you still have to perform. And there was obviously a letdown last night in Indiana. I think they have to really get tougher. And they have to realize that this is the business of basketball, man. You're going to have to develop your young talent. You're going to have to try to win basketball games at the same time, have your name involved with somebody that doesn't even play with your team. You know what I mean? And that's one of the things that makes it tough to play in this league. You
mentioned the business of basketball, and it seems to completely be evolving or continuing to evolve. And you kind of started it with the super teams and having the big three in Miami. How have you seen it change? I mean, AD coming out and saying, look, I'm looking for a trade. I mean, that's something that we are just starting to see now.
There have always been trade demands. I think the players now are a little more flexible in those demands. They have a little bit more power than in times past. But, I mean, it's always been like that to me. I mean, the super team conversation is always very interesting. I think now people are trying to be more, players are trying to be more of the architects. But, I mean, back in the, 60s, I mean, I think the Celtics, how many jerseys do they have in those rafters, So it's always taken a lot to win an NBA championship.
Speaking of jerseys in the rafters, yours is going up in Miami. They're retiring Chris Bosh's jersey on March 26th. Endless congratulations for that. But speaking of super teams, you know from the inside what it is like. I covered the Bulls in the 90s, and I saw when you are that good and there's that much attention, it becomes a combustible situation no matter the personalities. And so I wonder, with you having had that perspective, what you think they're going through in Golden State right now. Now they're looking for their third championship. Everyone, all the talk about, will Kevin Durant leave? Will he stay? Friction between him and Draymond Green. Take us inside what it's like when you are the Beatles or the Heatles, as you guys were, and the whole world is gunning for you.
First of all, there's friction. There's going to be friction sometimes, and that's a part of team sports, People have to realize that sometimes. It's polarizing when everybody is looking at you and you see an argument, and that's a part of getting better sometimes. I remember before, I always thought that it was a sign of failure, but it's actually, to me, a sign of success. And, yeah, sometimes you get tired of the guys sitting to the left and to the right of you sometimes. I mean, it's a long season. They're trying to do things that haven't really been done in the sport, and everybody's watching. And that's never an easy thing to do.
Do you feel like super teams in today's landscape could actually ruin the NBA long term?
Maybe. I do think it's an interesting dynamic, and usually that's always the give and take with the collective bargaining agreement and the rules that are set in place to kind of control those things. But, yeah, it's kind of tough sometimes because when you're, let's say, Anthony Davis sitting in New Orleans, you're trying to get free agents to come there. You're trying to get a great team around you. You're trying to compete every day and work your butt off in hopes of an MVP or a championship, and those things don't happen. And you're watching Golden State, you're watching LA, Miami, you know what I mean? Compete for championships, that's really tough to handle. And I mean, sometimes you don't get that situation like San Antonio's built out there. That's a special thing, and that doesn't happen every day.
You know what I always wonder? You can tell us the truth now. Because years later, we found out that you guys knew you were getting together long before the whole rest of the world knew it. So guys like KD, Kyrie, all the guys who are going to be free agents this summer, do they already know what they're going to do?
I don't think so. I think they have, and this is just me talking, I don't know this for sure, but you can have conversation. Guys have phones and direct messaging and Twitter and Instagram, everything. So guys can talk to each other. That's no problem. But when you come into the situation, when it's really time to make a decision, that's a whole different story. You know, I remember I thought I knew everything at one point in time, but when you get those pitch meetings and you get the teams actually offering you and talking to you and you see everything on paper, you know, your mind starts to shift a little bit.
Can I get one college hoops question in for you?
Yeah.
Zion Williamson. Do you think he's a superstar in the NBA? Because I don't know, Jalen may beg to differ. But what is your take on his skill?
I mean, that's a very, very, very tough question. That's too much pressure on the young fella, you know, right now. When those things happen, yeah, you're going to have guys gunning for you. And this is the best basketball in the world, you know. And I think he is an exceptional talent. I do think he'll be the #1 pick. He's amazing. Shows athleticism. But it's this thing called a scouting report.
Preach.
Preach. And people take it very seriously. And the deeper you get into the NBA, the more difficult it becomes to be successful. So I would advise him to continue to work on his game and work more after that because guys are going to be gunning for him.
All right, I have to take a break.